Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jean Sinzdak. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for American Women in Politics at the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University. I'm glad to welcome you all here. As many of you know, we usually host Ready to Run as an in-person program, but for obvious reasons, we're all here virtually in this moment, but we're pleased to be able to continue to offer these trainings and provide this service to those of you who are running for office or thinking of running for office. And we hope to encourage all of you to get involved in politics. We have a national network of Ready to Run program partners, and we thank them for co-hosting this webinar. They are also hosting their own programs, both in person and virtually throughout the spring. And so we encourage you to check out our website where you can see a list of all of our partners around the country and their upcoming programs. We also want to thank our Ready to Run sponsors for making it possible for us to offer this webinar series free of charge. You saw the sponsors on the opening slide. You can also find a list of them on our website. We are, as always, deeply grateful to them for their support in making this possible. I also want to quickly thank my colleague Pooja Prabhakaran for basically running everything related to this webinar. She's the one who makes all the magic happen, so thank you to her for all of her hard work. So now I'm glad to welcome you officially to the keynote session for the Ready to Run virtual series. This is a big moment in New Jersey politics in that we're celebrating the first Asian American women elected to the legislature, and we are grateful to them for being here to share what this moment means to them and to the state. And we are grateful to Assemblywoman Shama De Sumter for moderating this important conversation. I am about to introduce the panel and turn it over to them. That's why you're all here, but first some quick logistics. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box that you'll see on your screen. We will field the questions for Assemblywoman Sumter while she's moderating, and we'll share them with her during the Q&A portion at the end of the panel. And then also a reminder that this series is ongoing, and we have a number of sessions coming up in the next several weeks, and we'll put a link in the chat so you can register for the rest of the programs. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the panel to you. First, Assemblywoman Shama Haider was born and raised in Pakistan, and she served as secretary to the Prime Minister's wife before emigrating to the United States in 1977. In 2001 and 2015, she was elected to serve on the Tenafly Borough Council, and in 2021, she became the first Muslim woman to be elected to the New Jersey State Legislature. So welcome to Assemblywoman Haider. Next, we have good to see you. Next, we have Assemblywoman Siddharth Jaffer. She is an Assemblywoman representing New Jersey's 16th Legislative District. As Assemblywoman, she uses her local expertise to work to amplify the voices of her residents, her district residents, especially underrepresented communities. She is the first Asian American woman and the first Muslim American to be sworn into the New Jersey General Assembly, along with Shama Haider. She is the former mayor of Montgomery Township and currently teaches at Princeton University. She and her husband, Dan, a professor at Princeton, are raising their daughter in Montgomery Township. So welcome, Assemblywoman Jaffer.
Great to be here.
Next, we have Assemblywoman Ellen Park. Assemblywoman Park immigrated from Seoul, South Korea in 1978 to Sunnyside, Queens, New York. She moved to Flushing, Queens, where she attended and graduated JHS 189. She attended and graduated from Bronx High School of Science, received a BA in political science from New York University, and received a JD from Hofstra Law School. She has been admitted to the New York State Bar since 2000. She and her husband founded the law offices of Ma and Park, located in New York City, a law practice focusing on criminal law and real estate law. She currently works for a national insurance brokerage company. She moved to Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey from New York City in 2009. She has 2 sons, and she's a former councilwoman of Englewood Cliffs. So welcome, Assemblywoman Park.
Thank you for having me.
And last but certainly not least, Assemblywoman Siobhan De Sumter, who will be moderating our panel today. Assemblywoman Sumter has served in the New Jersey General Assembly since 2012 and has served in the executive leadership of the Assembly as Deputy Speaker and Majority Conference Leader. She currently represents the 35th Legislative District that includes parts of Bergen and Passaic County. She currently serves as the chair of a new Assembly committee, Community Development and Affairs. And she's also a member of the Labor and Law and Public Safety Committees. She's an advocate for job growth, women's health, voting rights, civil rights, and criminal justice reform. Recently, the governor signed her voting rights legislation into law that will restore voting rights for more than 80,000 individuals who are currently on probation or parole, effective March 2020. So without further ado, thank you all so much for being here. We're so glad to help celebrate this historic moment for the legislature and the state. And I will turn it over to Assemblywoman Sumter.
Thank you, Jean, and welcome, ladies, to the New Jersey General Assembly. You have broken some records, and I am honored to serve with you. It's going to be a fun time. We won't go in any particular order, but Ready to Run is an exciting program, and I'm sure all those joining us on this virtual training will appreciate your stories, because you'll never know how it pours into people. And I guarantee you, you'll meet people along the way who'll say, I saw you on Ready to Run, and you said this one thing that connected with me and helped me to make the decision to run for office. So without further ado, let's get started. So our first question is, you've had a historic win in a tenuous time. What will this win mean, or what does it mean for Asian American women in New Jersey going forward? And I'll start with you, Assemblywoman Haider, and then I'll move to Assemblywoman Jaffer, and then to Assemblywoman Ellen Park, and we'll rotate. Assemblywoman Haider.
Thank you. Being the first in any category brings with it a lot of, it's exciting, but also brings a lot of responsibility. And all of us do this in the hope of serving the public better. But at the same time, we also want to be examples for those who follow. So for me, I think the most important thing is that if people see me in this position, for them, it will be a message that I can do that. I can do absolutely that. I can do even better. And people who may have never thought of running for this position or any position, you could be running for the smallest position in your town to run for president. You always have to have that knowledge that somebody did it and they were successful. And even if they were not successful, I always tell everybody, don't worry if you lose an election, because that's just one step closer to winning the next one. So I really hope that my example of being an immigrant, being a Muslim, being a woman of color will be there for others, not just like me, but for all others, and particularly women who are always a little more hesitant to put themselves out, a little more hesitant to say, I'll run for that. The guys in the room will raise their hands immediately. But we sometimes need that little push. So if I can do that for even one person, I think I will have done something worthwhile.
Thank you so much for that question. First of all, I just want to say it's such an honor to be back here at Ready to Run. I actually participated in this program before I ran for office, and I met my campaign manager, my first campaign manager at the program. So I'm proud to be here. And I've always seen the Center for American Women in Politics as a resource. And actually, I was looking through the list, trying to figure out who the first Asian American woman was, who was in the legislature. And I kept looking, and then I realized there had never been one. This is when I was considering running, and that really motivated me, because I felt like that is a shame in a state like New Jersey that has a 10% Asian American population, that has had Asian Americans living in these communities for hundreds of years. There needs to be that representation, especially of women. I think we all here agree that it's important to have women's participation in politics. And I'm so grateful for the Asian American men who have served in the legislature and continue to, but I'm very proud to be among the three of us who are joining now, who have joined now. I think what this shows is that all of the efforts that have been put in through organizations like the Center for American Women in Politics, through other organizations to motivate and inspire, have worked. I mean, for all this time, there hasn't been an Asian American woman, and suddenly there's three of us. So it shows that we're headed in the right direction. There's absolutely, definitely challenges that we face, but I think it's a hopeful moment. And, when people ask me if I ever thought I'd be a mayor, if I'd ever be in the legislature, I say no. And I think part of it is because I'd never known anybody like me who had been in those roles. And so I hope that it's different for the kids now, for the younger generation, that they see that this is possible and that there are many more who follow in our footsteps. Thank you.
Again, I just want to thank everyone for taking this time to get to know us a little better as your assembly representatives. And, you know, I do agree with, obviously, with Sadaf and Shama about everything they've said, especially about opening the door. And I think it sets a new norm, you know, instead of saying, no, that's not possible, it's why not? Why can't I do that? Right. So I think, you know, with anything, you know, the more exposure everyone has to how this is very normal, that women in politics, you know, is going to be in the future. I think it sets the bar. I mean, I'm watching commercials now where I never saw Asian people in a commercial before growing up. And now there's tons of Asian people on TV. And I'm like, wow, this is so different from when I was growing up here in the 80s and 70s, late 70s, right? So I think, you know, again, I'm so glad the three of us got on when we did. And, you know, I hope this, again, sets the bar for everyone below us who says, okay, it's very possible. You know, if I want to do it, I can do it, without kind of having the hesitation that we've had in the past. So I'm very happy and excited about what's to become. So thank you.
And thank you each for being candid. This is not by happenstance. And I think you all share the gravity of three of you coming in at the same time. So it's not just a one-off coming in alone to be the lone voice, having a seat at the table of the state legislature, where in the assembly it's 80 members, where you get to make laws for the 9+ million people of the state of New Jersey. And I know that's not lost on any of you. And the Center for American Women in Politics has been intentional about sounding the alarm for our party system to run women for elected office. So with that said, and I'll start with you, Assemblywoman Jaffer, what's the catalyst? And I know you touched on this a little bit, for you to run for the state legislature at this moment in time. You were a mayor. You mentioned that you were looking to see who was the first woman, Asian American woman in New Jersey in our legislature, and you saw there was a voice. So tell us about that catalyst that propelled you to raise your hand and say, you know, put me in.
Absolutely. I think the catalyst is always the community, because if you have been doing work in your community, oftentimes people will come to you and say, you know, you ought to consider XYZ. And we learn that women often need to be asked multiple times to consider running for office. And I certainly I was asked to run for local office and then asked to run for the assembly. And I felt like it was fulfilling a need of the community to represent someone who had experience in local government, to represent someone who would speak for the Asian American community, to be another woman in the assembly. We definitely need more women in the assembly. And I think for me, it's always a question of, I shouldn't point fingers and say, oh, someone should do something. You know, more women need to step up. Why isn't there one? If I have the opportunity and I felt like I did and I could win this, I should be the one to do it. I can't ask others to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And it is, as you said, an honor. It's very exciting. It's a privilege. It's power to be able to make legislation, to set the guidelines and the standards and so many things in the day-to-day lives of the people of New Jersey. So it's an opportunity that I felt like I could do this, and I guess I was proven right. And so far, it's been so wonderful to hear from members of the community saying, you know, we have this problem, you know, how can you help? And I can try to help, and I can connect them with the right resources. I can try to be creative along with my staff and my colleagues in coming up with solutions, because ultimately that is really what government is about.
Great, thank you for that. Assemblywoman Parr.
So, you know, I agree with stuff when it comes to, I would never ask somebody else to do something that I'm not willing to do. And I think that's very important. And, you know, to have also an opportunity to be asked is one thing, but I think for me was that, you know, during a little before COVID, there was the Me Too movement, along with all the Asian crime that was happening. And, you know, I think for me, my personal life as well, my kids are a little bit older. I have 2 boys. So, I was running as I was a councilwoman for one term, but they were very little at the time. And so, we have a kind of a crazy town. So our council meetings didn't end until 2 a.m. at times. And I work a full-time job as well. So between the family and the kids and the politics, it was a lot. But, I think this opportunity came where I think it was sort of like, I've had enough. I also need to do something. I can't just sit idly by when, there is such underrepresentation of Asians and Asian women. And personally, like I said, I think my kids are now 15 and one just turned 13. So they can make their own breakfast now and order, Uber Eats if they need to. So I think it was just all those things kind of lined up, and it was a great time for myself and the three of us to get in together. So.
Thank you for that candor with that answer, Assemblywoman Haider.
I think I agree with what Sadaf and Ellen are saying. There's always the right time. And I am a happy grandmother now, so I don't have to worry about anybody making breakfast or getting to school on time. And I've been involved for so long in local politics, having served on the council, being the municipal chair in my town, running candidate campaigns, so that I knew that when the time was right, if I had the opportunity, I would be able to take it. And that fortunately happened. And I'm so lucky that it happened when everybody else was also, when Ellen was on board, when Sadaf was on board, and other Asian members who are part of our caucus were on board to run at the same time. So it is just a matter of the time being right, of your almost of your mindset being, yes, I can do this. This is something I can do. And I felt I could do it. I felt I could expand on my public service by doing this. I could serve the community, and the community being not just my Pakistani American Muslim community. By community, I mean my district, and thereby the state of New Jersey. So it just happened to be the right time and the right place.
So you heard it here first, talking about community being important, talking about right time, right place, a caucus, an Asian American caucus, and I met a number of you prior to you becoming elected with different caucus meetings, and really coming in as a cohort, which will unite you and galvanize you on the issues that will impact not only the Asian American community, but the community as a whole, for sensitivity. And I'm glad you brought that up, Assemblywoman Park, on the crimes that were being committed against Asian Americans. And we stood in unity against hate crimes and bias crimes with our caucus last year. And still, hearing about the trauma of people being assaulted just because of their culture there's no place for it. So those are all things we can unite on. And I think that's important, to have a voice at the table and representation so others can see, all right, and have a visual look in the mirror of representation that looks like them. And your families, all important, of bringing your whole self, if you will, to the political process and arena. So our next question is, while this is a historic moment worth celebrating, it took us far too long to reach this milestone. We're in the 221st session of the New Jersey Legislature. Let me say that again. We're in the 221st session of the New Jersey Legislature. So Asian American women are here now. What do you think the biggest barriers are for all those who have been historically underrepresented in our state's elected offices? And how can we collectively work to change that? And I'll start with you, Assemblywoman Park, at this time for this question.
So I feel like that question has a lot of parts. And one of the, parts is that I think there's one of the biggest barrier for me would be that it's a cultural barrier. And the reason why, it's not like there's tons of Asian American women that are wanting to run for office, right? So if there was tons of Asian American women that are running for office, and the powers that be says, we have too many of you, so we can only select a few, is a different scenario. But I think it's the cultural barrier in that, I think all along being here in America, I mean, when I think Asian people see me, they're like, oh, you're not from Asia, really. I'm Asian American, right? Culturally, I am both, right? And I think there is sort of a stereotype in that both ways, right? So on the American side, we're seeing Asian women are seen kind of quiet and docile. And hence, in some ways, all this Asian crime and violence is perpetrated, and we're targeted because of the stereotype that we're not going to fight back, right? And then the other side, though, culturally is, as an Asian woman, I get a lot of like, well, your voice is so loud. You have such a booming voice, or, like you don't act like a normal, Asian woman, or, and so I feel like it's very difficult to maneuver to kind of be in both cultures, right? I'm Asian American, right? And I think we as Asian Americans have to, inspire and appreciate the women who run for office, and not try to make them feel like, well, you're not the typical culturally, they're mostly men, they're not women. And again, it's about seeing the norm of this. It's going to be normal now. There are going to be a lot more Asian American women in politics. And, that's trying to get the word out. And also I have boys, I have 2 boys and my husband. And so I think for them too, like, they're like, Mom, you're so different from the other moms, you're so, loud, or, growing up, they were telling me I'm a tomboy, and I think these kind of labels should not be, kind of thrown around anymore. How about I'm a girl who likes to do sports? Like, why is that a tomboy? So same thing in politics, that I think we need to kind of set the new norm. And I hope, again, this is just a beginning, and 10 years from now, we'll have triple the amount of women in politics. So I'm so happy that everybody has joined us today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Assemblywoman Haider.
I agree with Ellen that there's a lot of cultural barriers sometimes to this. And it doesn't even have to be, as in my case, I'm an immigrant. Even if my children are born here, I think there are cultural barriers, because as an immigrant community, even as children of immigrants, there's a certain label that, or maybe sometimes we inculcate it ourselves, that put your head down, keep doing the work, make good in this, you become the doctor, you become the lawyer, and nobody's looking at public service for that. That's part of it. But I also think that, and back to Ellen's point, sometimes when women get out there and make themselves visible, there are labels put on women. The woman is always pushy. The man is always a leader. So, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be sexist, but we have all, at some point in our lives as women, had that sort of, if not been told so, have felt so, So I really think there are other, and of course, when I started, like when I first ran in 20 years ago, there were far more men in the business. And, I would often go to places and be the only woman loitering around, especially the only woman of color or the only Muslim woman, and people would look at me, who's that? So it takes, you have to say, it doesn't matter. I've got to step out of this. I have to come out of this thing, which is sort of crowding me, that, this is a different situation. I can get into it. So I hope that we can serve as people who build the confidence in other women. And it doesn't have to be Asian American women. It doesn't have to be, women of color. I would love to see far more women stepping out. I don't think we even have the right complement of women in the legislature as yet. So it would be nice to have more women stepping up, more young women, more women more experienced women of all ages and all backgrounds, because I think that'll make a huge difference to how the laws are. And I mean that right up to the federal level, Hopefully we'll have a woman president one of these days.
All right, you're speaking truth to power, Assemblywoman. Assemblywoman Jaffer, please.
So we know that research shows that women and people of color win elections at the same rate. They just don't run as often. And I think getting to that step, though, requires so much background, so much cultural capital, that maybe people in minority communities and women just don't have. And as I got involved in politics, and certainly, when I was serving as mayor, I realized that a lot of the people that I was talking to would say, oh, my mom was on the school board, or my dad was the mayor of my town growing up. It was shocking to me how many people in politics, it was kind of something in their family. And if your community was deprived of those opportunities for power, didn't really have those opportunities in generations past, it's hard to break in. And that's why it is so important to have formal training and mentorship programs for women, for people of color. It's so important for each of us, and I know we all do this, to go speak to community organizations, to just give people an understanding of even how does the political system work. And that's something that's been a real passion of mine. I set up a youth leadership council. I used to do a lot of videos as mayor, and I'm trying to do the same in the assembly, just so people know, how does state government work? What is this thing? Because if they don't untangle it and they don't see the impact that it has on their daily lives, then they don't even see the purpose for stepping up. So I think that as much as we can democratize that knowledge and make sure everyone feels like politics is something that is a place where they belong, that the government is there to serve them, it'll be better for all of us. So I think, those are some of the barriers in the past, but I see we're seeing the fruits of all the work of so many organizations and advocacy groups that have been trying to change that. And I'm proud to be a part of keeping that ball rolling.
Awesome. And thank you, ladies. So it looks like we're going to take Trenton by storm with these three ladies, partner with us of the Legislative Black Caucus and our Latino partners and Latina partners. So we're going to have a good time this session. So do you think being an Asian American woman has an impact on your leadership style and the issues that you will make a priority in the legislature? And we'll lead with you, Assemblywoman Haider. If you can come off mute for us. Thank you.
I think leadership style is something, I think it's something very individual, but also I think it's a culmination of your life experience, of what you have learned, of what you have absorbed from your culture, from your history, from your family, that it becomes part of your personality. I am Asian American, and that is me. And whatever is my leadership style, or my how I am in the assembly, will always reflect who I am as a person. So I think that this comes from your experiences. Of course, there's a lot you learn as you go along the way. What you learn when if like I was on council, what you learned in politics, you've learned what works, what doesn't work. But that inherent self of you will always be intertwined with what you do and what you don't do. So I don't know how to separate it and say, this part of me will not be part of my leadership quality, and this will be. I think it's always going to be an inherent part of whatever I do, with all that I have learned in my years of working in politics and the experiences I have picked up along the way.
Great, thank you. Assemblywoman Jaffer, you look like you were ready to go, so go for it.
So I think, each of us brings our experiences, our communities, our histories to the work that we do. And that's why it is important to make sure that we have a diverse cross-section in elected office, because otherwise we're not hearing about the needs of everyone in our community. And I can think of a couple of examples that I think show this very clearly. One of them is that, I was serving as mayor during the pandemic, and we were putting a lot of resources to make sure that people knew about the food pantries and where to get food aid. And I had someone approach me and let me know that the undocumented members of our community were afraid to go to the food pantry because they thought that there might be some sort of an immigration enforcement. And that meant that they were going hungry. And I brought this up on a call with a number of mayors that I was on. And some of them, obviously listened, heard. Some of them seemed a little bit incredulous, like, oh, no one's told me this. And that was actually the time that I realized I was the only person of color who was a mayor on that call. And, certainly the only person who would maybe immigrant communities would feel more comfortable letting me know about this problem. Similarly, we know that there was a rise in domestic violence during the pandemic, and it's a perpetual problem. But I had women from various racial and ethnic backgrounds in my community approach me and let me know that they were experiencing domestic violence. And so I would try to get them the resources that they needed, and also made sure that regularly when we sent COVID information, we also sent resources for domestic violence. And again, I felt very humbled thinking, if I was a man serving as a mayor, would these women feel as comfortable approaching me? Would they then be able to get the resources they needed? So it's very, very important that we have people from all different backgrounds so that all of the communities that make our state so rich and make our state so vibrant get what they need and are served in the way that they deserve.
Again, it goes back to sort of, yes, my culture as well as my own personality. I've always felt, I've always been told that I'm very loud. So I have a big voice, which, again, kind of propelled me to be, in the assembly, and wanted to get into politics because I am, the type of person that would not have a small voice or keep quiet, and obviously, again, that's cultural. But I think, because I am Asian and I have an Asian background and there's so much still, all this anti-Asian violence. I don't know, thank God, like District 37, it's very safe. But you hear all the time right over the bridge in the city, Asian women are getting killed all the time. I think one of the diplomats from Korea got his face just punched out of the blue. And, like when things are like this are always happening, I feel like, I have to somehow do something about it. I can't just stay idly by and not do anything about it, right? So, of course, those issues are very concerning. And I find that those issues, are very important to me. As well as, I spoke to the Anti-Defamation League the other day, and, it's about getting the word out again, right? And it's, there are many instances of anti-Asian hate crimes in District 37 and possibly in Bergen, but no one ever reports it, and they're trying to help us, kind of get the word out to say, even if it's a small thing where someone shouted something to you on the street, we should at least keep data and figure out like if this is a one-time thing, or maybe it's a concentration of a certain town or an area that this keeps occurring. So if people don't speak up, like we're never going to know, and we're not going to be able to do something about it. So, for me, I really want to voice that and let the community know it's okay. Speak out. Like you're not going to get in trouble. And it's really going to help the benefit, not only for you, but for our future, our children. And that is very important. So
I think you ladies are coming into the legislature ready to serve with your agenda pretty much mapped out, and a couple of key elements that you just mentioned of being a safe space for people to relay what their fears are, food insecurities, which greatly impact all of New Jersey, but we knew people of color at a greater number than any other community in the state of New Jersey during a historic pandemic. Also having family support, critical. When I ran for office, my son was 12, my daughter was 13, and it was by no means easy, but they were right in there with me, and you two will survive. And they respect it, and they start asking you questions about running for office, and their friends are watching as well. And then funding. You all haven't touched on the money that it costs to run for office. So as we have our listeners with us for Ready to Run, if you each will share what was your fundraising experience as a woman of color, Asian American woman running for office at a state level in the state of New Jersey? And we'll start with you, Assemblywoman Jaffer.
Thank you. I, at the local level, ran a very scrappy campaign, and I was outspent by my opponents 3-1, but I still won. And I think, money is important, but it's not everything. And so if you have your message, if you have your connections with the community, you can win, but you definitely need the funding to amplify that. And certainly, running locally is different than running in an entire legislative district. In the legislative district, I have to say that I received so much support from my party, from Democratic Party leadership, from my running mates. And there was a lot of response from the community wanting to support a fresh voice in the assembly. So, it takes organization, but there are people there willing to support you. And if you have the tenacity and you kind of connect with people, and I received a lot of support from women in government in general, people who have an interest in supporting women in the legislature. So those resources are there. You just have to be organized about it. But I would say, don't be afraid. I think a lot of people, they shy away from politics because they think, oh no, I don't have that kind of money. And I think that is probably something how I used to feel. Like, I don't have that kind of money. I'm not independently wealthy. How am I going to do this? But you don't have to be. We join together, and people will join together and support you, and you'll do the same for them.
Am I next? Okay.
Yes, Ellen, sorry.
So it's true. Money is always a touchy subject. I hate asking for money. Even if I borrow $5, someone borrowed $5 from me, I will try to forget it. I hate asking people for money. But there is a difference between running. I also ran for council, so there is a difference between running for council and running for state, obviously. And the one thing I did learn from running for local office is that even if it's $5 or $25, if it's a small amount, people feel vested in you, and so to them, like, whether it's a lot of money or a little bit of money, the fact that they actually gave you money means a lot, right? So I took that from local politics, and what I did was I actually reached out to everybody I knew, including, so I graduated from Bronx Science class of 1990. We have a Facebook page. So I put it on the Facebook page that I was running for council. I, went to NY. Everyone I knew, I basically asked, like, even if it's $5 or $10, like, just please donate, and because we need this. And it's not about just me. Again, it's about having this representation, right? So I actually was very surprised and delighted that I was able to raise a lot more than I had expected to raise, which says a lot, right? Because then the community's like, and it was all from the community, like I got various little amounts from, because I'm very new to the situation. So the fact that they came out and was able to, give me $10, $25, whatever it is, meant a lot to me. And, that also kind of fuels me for the next election, because, well, if you did this the first time, perhaps, the second time will be even bigger and better. So I would say just, reach out to anyone and everyone, and even if you're embarrassed about it, you still have to say something and ask in order to get it. If you don't say anything, you're not going to get it. So again, it's just about speaking up. So, yeah.
Hi, yes. I'll say one thing right at the outset. Fundraising is hard. It's not something which comes naturally to most people. It certainly didn't come naturally to me. And Sadaf, I agree with you, running council, and Ellen, you too. Those are scrappy things when you think about what you have to do for assembly. I mean, you can run around putting the signs yourself. You can beg here, there, and everywhere. You need to step up your game when it's assembly. But of course, you'll never get the money, like Ellen said, if you don't ask. It is hard. It's easier to ask for somebody else. As municipal chair, I was happy to call and say, so-and-so is running for mayor, please support them. But when I have to call and say, I'm running, please support me, it suddenly becomes a little, because somehow this is what, I think there's this mindset about it's not nice to ask for money. There's something like that in our brains, I don't know, but we have to ask. And it gets easier. It gets easier once you start. And of course, we had support from the community. I was surprised at the community support that I got. I wasn't, I was really taken aback at how people were willing to come up and support you. And the other thing was, of course, we had support from the party. I cannot, minimize that. And that helps also. But the first hurdle is to say to yourself, I can do this. Like somebody said, sometimes people don't do it because they think, I'll never, oh my God, I need to raise so much money. I'll never be able to do it. You can. You may not need all that huge amount. You may need less. You'll be surprised. You may raise more than that amount you thought about. But you have to determine it to yourself that, yes, it can be done. And I'm sure it will be done. But that still doesn't make it any easier.
All of that is true, but getting to yes requires that you ask. You may get some no's along the way, but you definitely will have people surprise you who will invest in you. One of my favorite stories is whenever I see some of my seniors, they will give me that $10 and say it will cover postage. And I say it absolutely will, because they want to feel a part of your campaigns. And it's always important to give people that opportunity to support you on your journey. So at this time, I do believe that we're going to open up for questions. I see some questions in the chat for us, ladies. You've been fabulous. So I'm going to ask that you continue to be open and candid with this conversation. And to our viewers, know that in the legislature, we also have a women's bipartisan caucus that, again, COP has helped us all to get elected, all to be trained, all to be mentored. So we thank them for their conscious effort to make sure New Jersey was no longer in the bottom of states for women elected to office from both parties. Jean, if you want to read off some of the questions or give me some direction here so we can make sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for moderating, and to all of you for all of your comments and thoughts. This has been terrific. I'm just going to start the first question. Thank you for speaking today. Great conversation. Did you encounter individuals either within your AAPI community or beyond who tried to discourage you from running? Perhaps saying that a woman couldn't win, that non-AAPI voters would vote for an Asian American candidate, or that you needed to wait your turn and pay your dues, etc. Good question.
Anyone wants to go first?
I'll take it. Oh, go ahead, Ellen. Go ahead.
Right. So I think definitely you have the naysayers who come out of the woodwork and say, do you really want to do this? Does it make a difference? And, I had people say, well, yeah, you're Asian, but you're Muslim. So are the Asians who are not Muslim going to vote for you? And my response was, I'm not that cynical. I don't think people are just like, you're exactly like me, so I'm going to vote for you. I think people really want to vote for the best candidate out there. And if you can connect with them, that's what's important. I think it's justified. I had people say, is this really the time for people like us to put our names out there? Maybe we should just lie low because of all the hate and bias. And I think we've all faced it. But we can't let those people define us. We can't let the worst of our society set the standards. We have to make our society what we want it to be. If we want it to be inclusive, we have to be inclusive. We need to have people who share those values in elected office. So that is kind of what my response has always been. Like, I don't want to fall to that level of thinking that people won't vote for someone who's not the same race as them or the same religion as them. And I don't want to believe that it's it's just politics, just too terrible. I think too many people have fought too hard to give us these opportunities for us to just give up. We need to keep fighting, and we need to make things better.
You want to go next?
Please.
Okay. For me, no one has actually voiced that to me. I mean, what they might have said stuff behind my back, but have not voiced it to me. Obviously, if they did, knowing my personality, I'm like, I would probably lose it. But at the same time, I feel that, this is the time. If not now, then when? right? And I'm tired of like the questions. Like the question should be why not? Why not? Why not now? Otherwise it's just going to perpetuate the same issue, and it's going to be another 20 years until Asian women are going to be considering going into politics. So I was actually surprised that it's 2022, and I'm not to sound but I'm the only East Asian woman out of the entire body, and I'm like, I was very surprised and a little bit taken back, right? And maybe again it's a personality thing, right? Because maybe in some ways I am more Americanized, as some of my Asian counterparts might say, right? But I really feel that this is sort of the beginning. This is a movement now for all women, and I'm telling this to my two boys, like, I don't know what they're watching on TV, but I want them to understand that, reality is you make your own reality, right? So, mommy is going to be an Assemblywoman. This means something, right? It's not something that you should take lightly, because we all work hard to get to where we're going. And, because they only, obviously my kids are still very young and they're always talking about dinner, lunch, and everything else they don't care about. So, I am like, don't disrespect me because I am an Assemblywoman. But, moving forward, I really hope that this will set the bar and open the door to so many more women. And, as an attorney, I'm only admitted in New York as of now, but as an attorney in New York, there are always judges, women judges, or judges of color that always try to inspire and have their summer interns be, African-American or Asian, or, they try to promote more attorneys, trial attorneys. That's the other thing, right? There's a lot of transactional Asian attorneys, but not trial attorneys. And I saw that and I'm like, that is so great what they're doing. And I hope to do that as well, being an Assembly.
For myself, I didn't have somebody come directly up to me and say, don't run because, this is not, but sort of muted questions were asked. And the one being, will you be able to raise the money to run for this office, which is a legitimate question. And then a couple of people did say to me, but you think as a Muslim, this will make a difference? I don't believe, I'm kind of past that, So I think that there always are people who will, and they don't mean ill. They are just, I think they may be even your well-wishers. They don't want to see you fail. They don't want to see you in some kind of a problem. But I think that you have to decide that for yourself, that even if I fail, I'm going to do this. And so I think that is what is important, is that, yes, there'll be always detractors and they may wish you well, but make that decision and do what you have to do.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to sort of put a question together from some comments that we've gotten from different people, but something that we've been thinking about at the center, which is, in the last 2 election cycles, we've seen record numbers of women running for office in the state legislative, congressional, statewide, executive levels. And we've seen more diversity among the women who are running. But we also know that progress is not inevitable, right? So we have these great moments, but there has to be, as the Assemblywoman pointed out at the beginning, there has to be some intentional work behind it to get to this point. Do you have any advice for the women who are thinking about running or helping other women run, or any of us, in terms of what would be useful to keep this momentum going, to make sure? I certainly, you're the first Asian American woman in the legislature, but we definitely don't want you to be the last, and we don't want it to be another however many years before there's more of you, right? So what are, just some thoughts, any thoughts you have would be great.
Assemblywoman Haider, your mic's unmuted, so why don't we start with you?
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, if anybody's thinking of running, I would say bravo to you. Do it. Do not let anything deter you, because, and it doesn't matter if you don't get in the first time. I didn't. I lost 2 elections before I won my first seat in council. And with the first loss, I was a little disappointed. The second one, I was even more determined to run. So don't let that detract you or make you feel that you can't do it. And equally for the women who are trying to help women candidates, you really have, elections are now almost like they're very organized. Learn all the nitty gritty. Learn who to reach out to. Do your homework on it. You'll win an election more if you know how to go about it. Because sometimes people want to run, they don't even know how to file their petition, that they need to file a petition. So that kind of information, the nitty gritty information, the fundraising information, get all of that together. Be there. Know the background. Talk to anyone and everyone you can. The more people know that you are intending to run, the more support you'll be able to garner. But don't give up on it. That's my biggest problem. Is I see people who, as municipal chair, I'm always trying to encourage people to run for council, to run for committee. People say, yeah, I'll run. But when I go to them and say, will you fill no, I don't think I want to do it this year. And that's the hardest thing, because they've suddenly given up on that. So don't give up on it. Get your homework, do your homework, but go ahead and take that first step. That's so important.
Does anyone want to add on to that? Because boy, she really summed that up.
Yeah, I was going to say something along the same lines, like take that first step, because it just escalates. And, I participated in Emerge, which is a program for women from the Democratic Party who want to run for office. I did Ready to Run. I made connections. Then I became a county director for the South Asian American Caucus of the Democratic Party. And I spoke at the Somerset County Convention. My husband was just reminding me of that. Like, however many years ago, I guess I was pregnant with my daughter. So like 8 years ago, would you have thought you were going to be an Assemblywoman? It's just, but you start talking to people, you start meeting people and help other people. I was actually campaigning for someone who was running for Congress when I was asked to run for local government. So you learn a lot by helping others. And, even if you're not ready to be so involved in electoral politics, come up with 1 or 2 issues that you care about, whether that's reproductive rights or gun safety or whatever it might be for you, and get involved with an advocacy group. That's a first step that I think is a little bit more comfortable for people maybe than directly jumping right into electoral politics. But take that first step and say yes to opportunities. I would not have predicted the path that I've taken, but when those opportunities presented them to me, I thought, why not? Why not me? I think I can do this.
Yeah, I just want to add exactly what Sadaf said is, it's advocacy. So, whether it's just volunteering at a food drive and then taking something from that, or for me, I guess people, ask me like what started, and I never really thought about it because I'm here and I feel like this was an entire journey already, right? But what got me started was being part of a voters registration drive when I was in school, and figuring out that I did a voters registration drive in Flushing. And I was out there 2 days and I got 2 registrations. And that meant, that said a lot. And I was like, why is this the case? And I feel like, with the food drives, whether you want to be part of Board of Ed or anything local, I would definitely start with going to a council meeting and watching and observing what happens there. And, and then on your spare time, maybe just kind of read up when it comes to local politics, national politics, international, and this way you can kind of gauge like what your real true interests are and what your concerns are about, the issues. So, start from there. And I'm sure once it clicks, you'll see, and it'll take its own path. So.
Awesome. Jean, I don't know how we're doing on time. Do we have time for another question?
Well, we have about exactly 3 minutes left. So I don't know if we have time for one more. I mean, I could give you, there are so many questions. I mean, I think people would listen to you all for hours if they could. There was a question about, related to the conversation about having small children. Having small children seems to be a hurdle for women running, but not for men. And what is your, what can we do to change this? So what's your advice on it?
I can speak to that a little bit because I first ran for office and my daughter was 2. And she's 7 now, 7.5. So her entire life that she can remember, I've been running for office. And I think that we need our partners, a lot of whom are men, to also think that this is a normal thing. I think for so many generations, women have been doing that unspoken labor of taking care of the children of their spouses who are elected officials. And now a lot of men are doing that or stepping up. My husband's wonderful, but I think that that's what we need. We need that village to, spouses who are willing to do it, family members and communities that can say, hey, if you need babysitting because you have to go to an event, you have to canvass. I mean, it would have been impossible for me to do this without my husband's support. But it's something that I get asked a lot in interviews, like, how do you manage? And it's not a question that's asked to men because it's just assumed that their spouse is going to help them manage. So everyone needs to be a part of the solution of getting more women involved in politics. And that includes all of the men in our circles.
Awesome.
I just want to say that, I think, it's hard for me because my husband actually works in the city. So he doesn't get home till like 8, 9 o'clock. And then that's part of the reason why it was hard for me to run again for council was that, my kids were too little. And even though I do have help, I do also work. So, and I think I read this article in the New York Times about how women, even though we work just like men, we still do most of the household chores and duties. So, with that, you have another tacked on, politics. And, I had to tell I'm joking, but my 3 boys, right, that, they have to be part of the team and I can't do this by myself. And you really, I think, my kids are obviously a little bit older. Like I said, they're 15 and 13 now. And I think they see now what it means to be part of the legislature, what this means for them and what this means in this time of history. And I have to say that it's kind of, helped me and with them, and that they're kind of figuring things out for themselves, and that, what this means, not only for us as a family, but what also it means as a movement, right? And they would not, I think they would be very sad, or they would feel guilty if they didn't help me out and I couldn't run for office because, they couldn't make themselves breakfast or something. So, I'm very thankful that I do have the support. And I think, it's very important to have that discussion with your family before running as well, what this could mean. There's gonna be a lot of sacrifice. That could be financial, it could be time, it could be many different things, but that definitely discussion has to be had. So I'd recommend a discussion.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Haider, did you want to offer anything before we wrap up? Okay, you're on mute, so I'm assuming everything is fine.
Sorry. I'm on mute. No, I agree with both. I think what they said is absolutely right. And my kids are, of course, adults. So at this time in my life, I don't have this issue. But I truly understand it because I work closely with Ellen. So I know the issues that she has to face. And they're both absolutely right in what they have said.
So to our audience, to COP, I want to thank them for pulling together this auspicious panel of superstar Assemblywomen who are cracking the glass ceiling. Welcome to the New Jersey Legislature. We're going to do some great work. You heard it here first, serving on the municipal level, volunteering, doing advocacy, not being afraid to raise your hand and say yes. Let's make it into the White House. You heard it here first. So we're going to do some great work in the state of New Jersey with this awesome group of Asian American women who have entered the New Jersey Legislature. So thank you for allowing me to host. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you on the issues that are important to all of New Jersey.
Thank you.
And I also want to echo the thanks to all of you for being here. It was fantastic. And we look forward to being in touch with you. You're all such great role models for the women out there that are thinking about running for office. So thank you. And thank you, Assemblywoman Sumter. As always, terrific to see you. And thank you so much for leading this wonderful conversation.